Hello, my name is Ruby Falconer. Today's date is April 27th, 2020, and this is an astrological update from the perspective of Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. I want to acknowledge that we are moving into a shift. The primary thing that has happened is on April 25th, on Saturday, today is Monday, the planet Pluto changed direction. Pluto is now retrograde. It's still pretty much at the same place that it's been, but it's going to very, very slowly, and that's very slowly in the case of Pluto, begin to, from our perspective here on Earth, appear to be moving backwards. When a planet turns retrograde, its energy turns inward in some way. And particularly for the outer planets, which are the planets that most initiate change on our planet. When a planet turns retrograde, and I'm speaking most specifically about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but I'm also going to include Jupiter and Saturn in here as well, because they are certainly forces for change. When they turn retrograde, they tend to stay retrograde for quite a while. And what will happen during that time is instead of having a driving force forward for change, things start to become more internalized. So we've just had Pluto change direction on the 25th, and we're going to have both Saturn and Jupiter change direction soon in mid-May. These three, Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, these are the three planets that make up the great shift of 2020, that is the energy that is so prevalent right now. So pretty soon, by mid-May, all three of them are going to be retrograde. Specifically, Saturn is turning retrograde on May 10th, 11th. It depends kind of on where you are in the United States and where you are in the world. And then Jupiter's turning retrograde on May 14th. And right in between the two of them, Venus is also going to be turning retrograde on the 12th, 13th. So that week is going to be a big week, and I'll talk more about that when I get there. But we're going to have three planets all changing direction that week, and two of them are the other two planets that are part of the Great Shift. So let's just kind of come back to where we are right now. And when I did this reading or this update last week, I didn't do it on a Monday, I did it on a Tuesday. And for those of you who listened to it, I shared with you at that time that the reason it was a day late is because I was dealing with a health crisis with my dog Bella. And I had spent all day on Monday at the emergency vet hospital with her. Bella did not make it. Last Wednesday, I had to let Bella go. And so her body was not able to sustain life anymore, and she was suffering. And so I made the very difficult and painful decision to say goodbye to my beloved Bella Blue, who has been a life companion to me now for 11 years. And that's painful. I'm mourning, I'm grieving that loss. What I had been saying for quite some time, that if Bella could just make it through the 25th, I felt like she would have a chance. And what I meant by that is if her body could hold up, once Pluto changed direction and went inward, then I felt like she might have time to heal and she might have a chance to move on and be with me for a while longer, but that was not to be. So there have been a lot of folks over the last period of time, particularly some very painful losses over the last couple of weeks, as Pluto has been slowing down and been stationary, preparing to turn retrograde. Its energy has been very, very strong. So Pluto is the lord of the underworld, the god of death. In the Egyptian pantheon, he's Osiris, the lord of regeneration. And he really reminds us in that expression that all life must end, and every death is a precursor to new life. But when you're going through the process of death, of letting go of something or someone or somebody that you really love, it's hard to remember that. It's just plain painful. So that energy has been very present with us. And it is interesting to know Pluto changed directions on Saturday, and here we are on Monday. And many people are sort of noticing a subtle sort of shift in energy that's already starting to happen. And it's interesting to note that in the United States, yesterday, the 26th, was the lowest number of coronavirus new cases and the lowest number of deaths in quite some time. So I don't know that that will go on. I'm not predicting anything, but it's just interesting to note that Pluto has changed direction and some of that energy, that driving force towards death, has moved off. When Pluto is direct, particularly when it's moving toward station, it's pushing toward that process of death and rebirth. When Saturn is direct, it's moving towards, it's driving toward that feeling of containment, which can become, if containment goes on for too long, a feeling of restriction and limitation. When Jupiter is direct, it's moving toward expansion. It wants things to open up. And those are the energies of the great shift. You know, we have the death of old forms and the expansion, the need for new. And that's the crisis in the sense of this time. The great shift energy is this process of things dying, and the feeling of constriction and limitation of old forms, and the expansion of that sense of restriction and limitation, and the expansion of the death process. That's been going on for quite a while, and it's not going to stop. And one of the things that we have to watch out for is with these three planets retrograde and the energy kind of internalizes and pulls back, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to allow us to resume life again. I'm not going to say normal life, because it isn't going to be normal life. That's gone, that has died off, but we will begin to resume life again. But we shouldn't allow ourselves to be fooled, because there is going to be a second wave. We're going to have in September and October, all three of these planets are going to turn direct close to one another. And so that's when the other shoe is going to drop, so to speak. And I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be another wave of coronavirus or if it's going to be something else. I know it's going to be something. And it's going to be something that's hugely transformative, because that's the time we're in. We're in a time of hugely transformative energy that's going to propel us into a new way of being. So that energy is very present. We have this kind of, in a way, it's sort of like we've had the crescendo, and now things are starting to pull back a bit, and that's going to continue as we move forward over the next couple of weeks. But what I wanted to speak into today was another energy that has been very present, both last week and also this week, and also really for the last period of time, really since the planet Saturn moved into the sign Aquarius, which was on March 21st. This energy has been very present and has been amplifying, amping up in a bit. And that is a square between Saturn, the principal constriction, the principal restriction. In the Egyptian pantheon, Saturn is Sobek, the old king. And this square is to Uranus, who is the great awakener, the shatterer, one of the three outer planets that have a lot to do with planetary change. In the Egyptian pantheon, Uranus is Wadjet, the Kundalini Cobra queen. She is life force. So these two have been moving into a square to one another. And the square is not exact. It's definitely in place. If a child was born during this time, we would definitely look at their chart and say, well, they have a Saturn-Uranus square in their chart, and it would make an imprint on their personality. There's no doubt about that. But it's not exact, and it's not going to become exact until next year. What's going to happen is when Saturn changes direction in May, in mid-May, it's going to start pulling out of the square to Uranus. And then on July 1st, Saturn is going to leave Aquarius and retrograde back into Capricorn, which is going to set up the next phase of the great shift energy. But we are in a kind of a on the mend kind of energy in some ways right now, that it has to do with the fact that Pluto has already changed direction. But to stay with this Saturn-Uranus square and what this means, the energy itself is really going to come back full force in 2021, and it's going to continue on into throughout 2022 as well. So we're going to have a couple of years that's really going to be marked by the Saturn-Uranus square. And that's certainly something I'll come back to when the time is right. But we're getting a taste of it right now. So I think it's worthwhile looking at it, what that means. These two planets are within 6 degrees of a square. Uranus is in the sign Taurus. Saturn is in the sign Aquarius. So they're about 84, 85 degrees apart from one another. A square is 90 degrees, so they're pulling into that square. And a square is a challenging relationship. Now, it's part of a cycle. And what I mean by that is an astrological cycle starts when planets are aligned. And in the case of Saturn and Uranus, the particular cycle that we're in right now began around 1988, 1989, kind of more or less in that time, concludes some of 87, that period of time. And so where we are right now, the two were conjunct. They moved into what we would call the first quarter square, if you think of a moon cycle. And then they moved into opposition, and now they're coming to what would be called a third quarter square. It's sort of the closing square. And then we will move on, and in 2030 to 2032, they're going to move back into conjunction. So if you want to understand what this is about, a Saturn-Uranus cycle, or synod, as it's sometimes called, is 45 years. And so if you want to understand what this 45-year cycle is about and what it's giving to our planet, so to speak, you can think back to what was going on in, say, 1988, 1989. And the most obvious thing is this is the beginning of the digital revolution. By this point, everybody, or a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people had computers. I got my first personal computer in 1988. I did that because I'm an astrologer, and the first astrology programs have been created, and I wanted to do my astrological programs quicker and more accurately. So I got a computer in 1988. And of course, this was the very beginning of computer, the internet, all of those sorts of things. People were starting to explore all of that. I remember it well. If you move on to the first quarter, I put my glasses on here so I can see. The first quarter was in 1999, 2001. And so, this was the time when 9/11 happened during that time period, and the forces that led up to 9/11 were very much in that play. The opposition was in 2010. We had the results, or the residue, of a global financial meltdown during that period. What was left over. We also had smartphones come into play. So we had gone from just having computers to now we have basically computers that we could put in our pockets and that we could carry with us everywhere. And so that was a real revolution. And so here we are now, the coronavirus at the third quarter square, and also an understanding that as we move forward, we're going to need to continue with some kind of technological revolution, because everybody's on the internet all the time using Zoom and other video platforms, and they aren't moving fast enough. For a lot of us, the internet has slowed down, and that's causing problems with work and school and the things that we need to get done during this time of social distancing and quarantine and all of that. One of the things I've been saying is I have no doubt that techno nerds of the world are all very busy right now coming up with new applications that are going to be coming forth probably next year in 2021 and probably the year after, that will really be another technological leap forward. And technology is often associated with the Saturn-Uranus synod. And I'm going to read something here because it's something that I looked up today, and I thought it was a very good description of the way Saturn and Uranus relate to one another. Saturn's the principle of restriction. It creates containers. Uranus is that eruptive life force. And one of the ways I often think about it is if you think of a chicken and egg, and the chick has gotten too big for the egg, and it's eaten all of the albumin, and there's nothing left for it in there, and it starts pecking from the inside of the egg, and there's a point where that egg shatters. Well, the egg itself is the Saturnian energy. It's the container that's held that new life force. But that chick is the life force. And when it's pecking away at that point where that egg shatters, that's the Uranian moment. Is Uranus always cracks the container. And so there's an element of chaos that comes with that cracking. But then there's also new life stepping forth because that's what's inside that egg and it can't be contained anymore. And so Saturn Uranus energy feels very chaotic on one level. And we've had Saturn Uranian energy last week as the sun in the sign Taurus moved through first a square to Saturn and then a conjunction to Uranus. That took place from April 21st through the 26th. So we had that energy in play. And we're going to have it this week as well, as now Mercury that's moving today into Taurus. And so Mercury will be square to Saturn tomorrow and then conjunct to Uranus on Thursday. So we're going to have the Saturn-Uranus square activated by Mercury. You know, the sun illuminates things. Mercury lets us think about it and talk about it. So the Uranian and Saturnian energy and the conflict between the two of them, of the container trying to hold and Uranian energy exploding it outward, that's very prevalent right now. And so it's worth looking at. So I have something that I want to read, which is something I got from a astrological website. It's called Historical Astrology, and those of you who are into these sorts of things might want to check it out. And this was written by Doug Walker, and so he was talking about what this energy is. Uranus and Saturn work together to bring into the human realm all sorts of new ideas, circumstances, inventions, discoveries. Uranus acts as a lens, a focal point for a channel he calls divine mind, the source of all new concepts and creative ideas. Again, for me, I translate that as Wadjet, who is the life force energy. She's the Kundalini Cobra. She's the essence of life force that cracks through all blocks and resistances to new life. Saturn functions to crystallize structure, to build, taking ideas from an infinite intuitive faculty that the human race hardly understands even today and births them into form. Saturn-Uranus synods, meaning cycles, have often worked to make tangible strides in the advance of human civilization. And because something has to be let go of, this is sometimes accompanied by chaos. The Uranus-Saturn energy is often associated with wars, with revolutions, with dynamic energy. When the Magna Carta was signed, was at a Uranus-Saturn conjunction. The printing press was invented at a Uranus-Saturn conjunction. The Civil War, we could kind of trace the different elements of Uranus Saturn as we move through the energies that led up to the Civil War and the residue that it left behind. World War II, 1942, a Uranus Saturn conjunction. And then we come up to the alignment, the cycle that we're in now that started in 1988. And that was a conjunction of Uranus and Saturn. And it also, over the next few years, from 1988 through 1990, there was a conjunction between Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And they were all in Capricorn. So in many ways, the energies that are going on now were birthed in a way then. And it's interesting to know that this is the beginning of the millennial generation. These young people are coming into maturity now, and these young people bring a lot to our planet that will be revealed in the years to come. So there's a lot of energy that comes out of the millennials. And this time, these young people were born at a very fortuitous time of a conjunction between Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune that in many ways is every bit as powerful as the energy that we're going through now. And these young people are coming into their maturity now. Many of them are having their Saturn return, or they've recently had their Saturn return and are stepping into their strength and power in the world. We're going to see more of that in the future. And it's a real shift to a new way of being on the planet and a new way for Capricorn energy to express itself. Capricorn energy and the energy of Saturn, the energy of Sobek, he's the old king. And while he's wise and he understands how to do things, he sometimes holds on too long. And we've certainly had a lot of that energy going on for quite some time on our planet. And we're ready for a revolution in many different ways, a cultural, spiritual, psychological, evolutionary revolution. And the great shift energy is certainly going to provide this force. But it's a chaotic way that it does it. It's not easy and it's not simple. So it's interesting that during this last quarter square of the Uranus Saturn cycle that began 45 years ago, we have this energy is a reflection in many ways of the energy that was going on from 1988 to 1990. So the main thing that I wanted to say is if things feel like in some ways like there's this kind of conflicted sort of energy, because on the one way it feels like the force of death is maybe stepping back just a little bit, that it's internalizing a little bit, and I think we'll continue to see that. We're going to be in a kind of an in-between phase now, between now and mid-May, when things will get very interesting that week when all three of the planets turn retrograde. That would be Saturn, Venus, and also Jupiter turn retrograde. So we're going to have this kind of stepping back, internalizing, settling down, but also not a lot of forward movement. But what we also have is this understanding that we need new systems. We need a revolution in systems to take place and something that supports new life. And that's going to be very much the conversation of this week if we choose to make it. So it's a chaotic time, but there's also a time for a lot of opportunities, a lot of new things to come forth, new ideas, new ways of doing things. A lot of creativity can be born out of this time. So what I would like to offer you now is an opportunity to go on a journey with Wadjet. Wadjet is often shows herself as a Cobra, who is she's again that Kundalini Cobra. Snakes throughout indigenous cultures have been associated with transformation and transmutation, of taking poison and transmuting it into life force energy. And snakes have often been associated with fertility and with the life force. So it has this element, when a snake shows up in a dream or when you see a snake symbol in a painting or in a work of art, it's often associated with the immutability of life force. It's kind of like when a blade of grass pushes itself up through concrete. That concrete can't stop it. You see it all the time. You see blades of grass growing in the lines between the concrete because it just can't stop it. That's, when you don't attend to things in a yard, nature just overtakes everything. That's the life force. That's Uranus. That's Wadjet. So I want to invite everyone to go on a journey. And right now we've got Saturn in this loose square. So Saturn's trying to kind of hold the lid on your radiant energy, but it's kind of seeping out here and there anyway. And it's really going to be difficult for Saturn to hold that lid next year. It's just not going to be possible. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. I'll be right there with everyone else observing and watching and sort of seeing how this correlates with the energies. But what I do know is we're getting a taste of it right now. And so each and every one of us in some way, even though things are still feeling kind of depressed, held back, there's some frustration around it, we can feel that life force energy pushing against the container, wanting to expand it outward. So let's go on a journey with Wadjet and see what sort of personal message she might have for each of us. And I will, at the end, I will call in Isis, because she has been the overriding force for this time. Isis is the Queen Mother of Heaven, who is always with us through every process of transformation and change. And so she is that cosmic solar nurturer who can come forth. She wraps her rainbow wings around us and holds us, invites us to rest against her. and to allow her to nurture and protect us as we move through these incredibly challenging times. So I want to invite everyone to get comfortable and take a couple of nice deep breaths. And just let go. Let go of any distractions. Allow yourself to drop into your bodies, all the way down to your fingertips, all the way down to your toes. And just letting any anxiety, any distraction, just to roll right off of you. And just feel yourself dropping into your bodies. And I invite you to imagine that you are walking across a desert. And this may be a desert in Egypt, it may be a white sand desert, it may be a desert in the southwest of the United States, or perhaps a desert in the interior of Australia or Africa. It may be a place you've been, maybe a place that you've only seen pictures of, or maybe just a place that pops up in your mind. But it is a place that's hot and dry, and there is not an abundance of life here. And I invite you to find a place to sit. It may be on the ground, it may be on a stone or a rock. A chair may magically appear. But find a place to sit. And just allow yourself in your mind's eye to look around at this place that you have come to. And as you do, in this vastness of heat, this vastness of dryness, this place where there does not seem to be life, you notice signs of life. It may be a plant growing in the earth. It may be a bug or a beetle moving across the sand. It may be a bird flying through the sky. There may be an animal who comes and sits and looks at you. There is life in this place, this desert, this dryness, this place of heat. And into this place now there comes a being, and this being is Wadjet. And she may come to you in her snake form, as a cobra or perhaps another kind of snake. She may come to you as a woman, a beautiful woman. She may come to you as a bolt of lightning. She may come to you in any number of forms, but she is here. This is Wadjet. This is Kundalini energy. Kundalini, simply speaking, is life force. And in some way, she makes contact with you. And she activates within you that life force that lives in you. And she uses her energy to increase it so you feel it in your body. There has been so much happening that has been tamping down our life force. Many of us have suffered losses that bring on sadness and grief, perhaps even a little depression. There may be fear, there may be anxiety. But Wadjet is here to crack through it all, just like the chick inside the egg cracking at that internal shell, because to not crack it will be to die. And Wadjet does not die. And she is bringing you a gift of your own life force. an activation of that life force within you. And I'm going to be quiet for a couple of minutes and allow you to interact with her, to commune with her, to receive a gift from her. It may come through a bodily sensation, through a memory. It may be words. It may be pictures. It may be a story. It may be colors. It may be something you feel in your body, an emotion or a sensation. She will connect with you in whatever way is appropriate. And whatever way she does is not wrong. This is Wadjet, the Cobra, Kundalini Queen, the essence of life force, the desire to live. Breathe deeply, connect with her, and let her take you on a journey. Remember to breathe. Taking a nice deep breath now, giving thanks to Wadjet for whatever she has given you, whatever message she has passed to you. And turning your attention now to the distance, the distant horizon, wherever you are, whatever desert you have come to. Wadjet by your side. You see off in the distance a bird that is flying toward you. And as this bird, with each flap of its wings, comes closer and closer, you realize this is a hawk. And this hawk soars above you, deep, lazy circles in the sky, spiraling down toward you. This is Isis, Isis in her hawk form. She is coming to join you. She is coming to join her shamanic sister Wadjet. And in some way, Isis connects with you. She wraps her wings around you. This is the Queen Mother of Heaven, who is with you through every process of transformation and change. So take a minute to lean back into her, to feel those beautiful wings embracing you, to feel your heart beat with her. Wadjet is nearby. The life force Kundalini Queen will not leave. Her energy is being imprinted on you as you relax back into Isis's arms, into her wings. And I'm going to be quiet for a minute or so and just let you enjoy this. Enjoy the nurturing, healing energy of Isis and Wadjet. Nice deep breaths. Allow yourself to receive. And giving thanks to both of these amazingly beautiful and potent goddesses. Taking a nice deep breath, and let yourself come back into the room. So thank you. Thank you for being with me. I encourage you as we move through this week to allow yourself to be aware of both the conflict, the chaos that must happen in order for a container that no longer serves us to break, because that life force energy must burst forth. And it's up to all of us to activate our own life force energy in support of the change that is happening and the change that is coming in the time ahead. Thank you, and I will see you again.